Welcome, friends. It is week 12. Is it week 12? Week 13. It is week 13, I believe. Oops. Oh, gosh. It's week 13. Let me change that. Week 13, that means we are that much closer to having the belt exam open up. Really, we're just a week away. So at the end of next week, that exam will open up. A little bit of housekeeping as always. You have a discussion question. You should have gotten an update on your status. You have a discussion question due this week and your core assignments. Let's go ahead and look at our class platform and see what we have for this week. Oh my gosh, Windows, I just upgraded to Windows 11 and it is killing me slowly. Okay, so here we are. We are working on login and registration, and we just have login and registration as your core assignment. We're basically building that today. And so you should be able to apply this and take it on to your assignment and basically do that. But yeah, so that's exactly what we're building today. Finally, what we will get to do as well is we will get to no longer have the form that has the user ID. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. My dog was acting a little bit odd and I thought she was about to have a seizure. But she is good. So that is great. Cool. So we are, again, we're building out this login and registration. We're no longer going to have to pass in the user ID. We're going to figure out a way that we can automatically do that, which will be nice. And we're going to introduce a little bit of security. Now, one thing I will point out is this is not like don't put cybersecurity on your resume because you know how to do bcrypt. This is not full on cybersecurity, authentication, stuff like that. But it is something that is a basic need, a basic necessity, and something you should absolutely know about. So we're going to make sure we cover all of that today. Cool. So if we're looking at the platform, I'm going to go to that real fast. We're in this Flask plus MySQL portion, and we're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to code a little bit, and then talk a little bit, code a little bit, do that fun little portion. So we're in the validation section, and we're here when we're talking about login registration, but we're going to go up just a little bit when we're talking about securing a password. So as of right now, what we currently, the system we have, and let's actually look at the code to look at this. The current system and the current thing that we have is when we're creating a user, we're just grabbing that password information, or we're creating an instance, we have this password information. And what we're doing is when we're creating one, let's go down to save, we are inserting, and then we're just inserting this value of password that we're grabbing from our form. And so if we look at our controller, we see create, and we're just taking the password from the form. This is what we call saving a password in plain text. This is the biggest no-no. You should never, ever, 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 ever do that. And we're going to talk about why here in just a bit, but that's what we're currently doing. So if my database ever gets hacked or leaked, we're going to have a bunch of emails and passwords available to us. This is a huge market in the sense of there are plenty of people. There's a really great podcast if you guys like tech, which I think you do because you're here, and you like kind of the crime. I don't know if you guys know like Crime Junkie or some of these other like crime podcasts. My wife loves it. It's like nothing soothes her more than listening like to the murder of something, which is so ironic and funny. But there's one called Darknet Diaries, and it's sort of the same premise, but it's not like murder. It is all cybersecurity stuff, hacks, big hacks, big nefarious organizations and people who steal passwords in the dark web. It's a really fascinating podcast. So it's called Darknet Diaries. I can't remember the person who does it, but it's like one of my favorites. And even listening to that and just knowing about tech, there's a whole market where people will hack a database or grab values, and they will sell that information to people, basically people that want to try to scam or they want to do X, Y, or Z. And so one thing we have to do is we have to protect our passwords and protect our users, right? because it's bad if or it's horrible if our stuff gets leaked. You hear about it all the time. It's even worse if that leak leads to something different. And this is why when you hear about, passwords and cybersecurity, and I'm a big advocate of this, is the reason this is such an issue is because most people have their email and just one password because it's easy to remember, right? It's easy to remember just one password. That's all you have to do. You can apply for everything. But if we get to the point where our stuff gets leaked, maybe I'm just a user and I use the same password for everything. I have one email or two emails and I have one password. If that happens, they can go through and let's say they crack that or the security is not good enough. What they can actually do is go maybe to my bank account, try to transfer money. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do if you have that information. That is why I'm always tell students, definitely want to do MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. Set it up with your phone or set it up with an app just to prevent that from happening. If that ever happens and they try to log in and they need an MFA code, they then need your phone number, and that's much, much harder to get. And they have to basically have your phone number and then clone that onto another phone. It's a really challenging. So it's a deterrent for sure. And secondly, I would say use a password manager. I use NordPass or there's LastPass or Bitwarden. So there's a ton of different ones, but basically in a perfect world, you should have a different password for every account you have. Now that's hard, but having one of these password managers makes it much easier because they will autofill and kind of handle a lot of that. Just in a knowledge kind of standpoint, we in tech are actually moving away from passwords. Sounds really silly, but kind of the big players, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, signed a petition / pact last year, I think, that said within the next 10 years, they're moving away from email or away from passwords and to biometrics. So that is your face IDs, it's using your eyes. Some people don't like that, but it is much more secure. It's really hard to hack that comparative to just having a password. Cool. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our first step at protecting our users, even though they're made up, hopefully, and hopefully you're not putting actual passwords here. But this is our first step for protecting them. Cool. So the first thing we need to do is we need to bring in, and just kind of, this is an example of what a text password is, right? Just like if you have it just as normal, if we directly stored it from our form to here, what we're going to do is we're going to hash our password. And what a hash is, and this is kind of the first, like it says, is the first step. A hash is basically we are going to create, you can sort of think about it like Indiana Jones, you're trying to figure it out. There's a word that I can't remember right now, but it is, it's kind of an idea of encryption where this, if you have some sort of process or some sort of way that you're manipulating it, if you redid it, right, and you kind of reverse it, it would equate to rainbows, right? And so this hash is just a, what's the word? It's whenever it's like a cryptogram, it's like cryptology kind of sort of thing, cryptogram, to where we can change it. It still is the same thing, right? So when it's broken down, it's going to say, okay, this is rainbows, or we're going to know what it is. But it's a more secure way because people can't look at that and say, oh, that's rainbows, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. Now, this used to be sort of what we did, right? Is we just hashed them this way and we encrypted them. And that was good. But there was this MD5 and SHA-1 that used to be kind of the standard, but hackers are going to hack, right? And so there actually are these things called rainbow tables out there. So what these rainbow tables are is basically on the dark web, if somebody, let's say, uses SHA-1, and these are the algorithms that hack or hash the stuff, MD5 and SHA-1, these are the algorithms that actually hash our passwords. Well, they figured out, okay, well, if I have the word password, that hash is this, right? Somehow they cracked it. And so they made these things called rainbow tables. So that way, if your company that hashes the password used one of these, they could just kind of scroll through it and say, okay, well, this is password and this is rainbow and this is unicorn. So that way, they could hack you, and it doesn't matter if it's hashed or not. They already know. It's kind of like a lookup table for hashes. So what we had to do is not only do we hash, but we also add something called salt. Now you can sort of think about this as making it even more complicated. We're adding more characters, and it can vary in range. We could add 10, we could add 20, we could add 4, we can add 8. And so because of that, they don't know, right? Okay, or is this a really long password? So therefore the hash is long. Do they add a lot of salt? Do they add little salt? And so it makes it much, much more challenging. One thing to note is the whole goal of hashing a password in this sort of security is not to prevent hackers from being able to have enough computational power to break it. That's not that. I mean, obviously that's helpful, but what our goal is we try to slow it down as much as possible. And so we're gonna use something called bcrypt, which is like takes the most power, and it's a really, really slow thing. So it's no longer a viable source of income because it takes so much computational power and it takes so long to try to crack these passwords that it's not worth it in the long run. And so that's what we try to do, right, with bcrypt, is just try to slow them down as much as we can to where it's no longer advantageous. And so that's why we add salt, because then it creates a whole other realm that they would have to break. Now, when we get to quantum computing, and I think this is probably why we're moving towards a biometrics, when we get to quantum computing, that's a horse of a different color. They've already done things theoretically that might take us 26 years. They did it in like 6 minutes with a quantum computer, or with quantum computing like theories. And so that's why we're moving towards more of that. Cool. Great. So bcrypt, again, is the hashing algorithm. Again, this is just an algorithm that we don't even know how it works, in the sense of, we don't know, okay, so it's going to make this character match to here, because that would sort of defeat the purpose. We just trust that bcrypt is going to hash this, and it is, right? It is kind of the standard right now for hashing a password in order for us to be able to use that. So we are going to install bcrypt here. So let me go ahead and open this up. Okay. So I'm in my week 11. So I'm going to say pip env shell. I'm going to activate my shell. Great. And if I say, remember, if I say pip list is going to give me a list of everything that I currently have downloaded within my environment. So I've got, Jinja, I've got PyMySQL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to install in my environment Flask bcrypt, so that way I can use it, right? So I'm going to say pip env install. Oops, not uninstall. Install. I'm going to say Flask bcrypt. Cool. Cool. So you don't have to do this. I like to sometimes just pip list just to make sure. And we see bcrypt. Great. Now we're able to utilize bcrypt on this project. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of follow this. Oops, cancel. I want to keep that. Let's come here. And what I'm going to first do, let me see if I can. Whoa. Sorry. So I just downloaded Windows 11. So this is pretty sweet. Okay. I'm not a super Windows guy, so sorry if this is a bother. Okay. So we are going to first bring in bcrypt. So from the very top here, let's bring that in. So I'm going to say from, and then I'm going to say Flask bcrypt, import bcrypt. So that way I can utilize it. And then I need to create an object called bcrypt. That way I can utilize that whenever I say this word bcrypt here, right? And so what I'm going to say at the very top is I'm going to say bcrypt. But I should say bcrypt equals bcrypt app. Cool. Great. So we now have that, and we have the availability to kind of add this in. So within bcrypt, this library that we just imported and brought in, there's a couple different methods that we're going to utilize. So the first one's going to be bcrypt, or it's going to be, sorry, dot generate hash or password hash. Now, one thing I want to be super clear about, this is just me calling a variable. This on the left, or it could be unicorn, it could be cupcake. We call it bcrypt because we should call it bcrypt. But when you say bcrypt dot generate password, if you called this anything else on the left, you'd say, unicorn dot generate password hash. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that there. Cool. So what I want to do is I want to kind of just look at, let's create a user. Let's see what happens when we create them. And then we can do that. So we're going to use this generate password hash, and we're going to basically hash our password. So here I'm going to print. So this is just my create statement, right? So when I fill out the form, this is just, kind of what happens. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to print password just so we can see at the beginning and the end. So I'm going to say print. Print. And then I'm going to grab my password. So I'm going to request.form password. And I want to see it in plain text. And then I want to actually hash my password. So I'm going to say PW hash. Again, bcrypt, because that's what I called it up here. Dot generate password hash. And what I do is I pass in the string or my password that I want to hash. And so in this case, I just type in the request.form password. And then I want to print PW hash. Cool. So that's all I want to do for right now. Let's go ahead and get this Python, what did I call it? Server.py. Let's get this up and running. Cool. It is running. We're good to go. Is that too small for you guys? You need that bigger? There we go.
Looks fine for me.
Cool.
It's a little small. That's good.
Did that get better, Gregory?
It was a little
Yeah.
small,
Okay. Is this big enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Cool. Great. Just wanted to do that. So whenever I say, I'm gonna say will, oops, let's change that. Or no, I already got real. We'll try Becky, Cal, b@c.com. And then I'm just going to type, I think I still have, we've got like a whole bunch of stuff. So I type in my password and I say create user. You see that here is my password I typed in. Remember, we said that we had to have one lowercase, one uppercase, and one number. So I typed in password. And after it's hashed, this is what it becomes. And this is what we're going to save it as in my database. So here's my plain text password. And after it's hashed, this is what it becomes. So this in my database is what I will see. That's why you can never, and the idea is that nobody should be able to look at it, even the company that, like even if I wrote this code and I go into my database and this is my application, I shouldn't be able to see and tell somebody, hey, this is your password. Your password is password. If you ever experience that, run as fast as you can because that company is not secure at all. Right? That's why you always just get hey, we can refresh it, but I can't tell you what it currently is because they don't know and they shouldn't. This is what they will see in their database. Cool. So now that all right, let me pause there. Are there any questions on what we've done? How you guys feeling? Scale of 1 to 5?
About like a 3.
About a 3?
Midway.
Yeah. All we're doing is we're just running this method and we're saying the one you want to hash, we're going to give it here. This comes from my request. Cool. Now, when we want to look at it and want to look up, which we're going to do whenever we log in, there's another one called check hashed or password hash. And so that is whenever we retrieve this from our database, we're going to get this hashed password and the password string. And so that allows us to compare these two values. Again, we don't know what the hash is like or how it worked. Bcrypt does that for us. So if we're comparing passwords, so when we log in, we'll basically retrieve that and we'll say, okay, does my password match? And if it does, great. And if not, okay, that's an issue. Okay. So we've done that. This is our kind of this is registration. And so what we can do is instead of, and this is why getting in the habit of breaking out your form into a data is helpful, because if you don't, you're gonna have to now, because we can no longer just pass request.form, right? We can't just say user.save data or user.save request.form, right? Because we don't want to do that. We don't want to pass the blank password or the plain text password. We need to hash it. And so that's why we come here, we build out our data, because then I can just say PW hash. And so now the password I'm passing is my hashed password. This is how we're saving it. Again, if I didn't have this and I just said something like, user dot save request dot form, this is going to just take the values from my form. So it's not going to hash my password. And therefore we're going to save it in plain text. So now that we're hashing, you have to break this down like this. So that way we can pass in this password or this hashed password here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Hey,
Great.
well,
Yeah.
is it okay if we put like without putting password hash, we directly put bcrypt.generate password? Also
Yeah, you
in-
could basically take that into here. That should work
Mhm.
fine. Just get rid of this line 29 and then just say, here bcrypt generate password hash. Yeah, that should be okay. Cool. Great. Now, we save just like normal. And that is something that is not unique. That's something we've done before, because we're just running the save now, but instead of passing just the plain text, we have our hashed password here. Now, the other unique thing that we can now do, or that we're going to do now, is now that our user is saved, and this is more so for creation, we're going to kind of treat this as like register, which is creating, right? But actually let's kind of backtrack. I'd like to create just a register, so let's do that. Let's go to my code. Let's think about how we can kind of modify this, where we've got this save, but I might just say register. I can keep it as save. Let's think about the functionality. I think all we would need to do is go into my code and see we have an index. And so instead of this sort of basic code here where we've got like a user form, I guess I could just go here. Instead of this, let's create this to say login or register. And then from there, once that happens, we could have like a dashboard that has, create new movie or show all users, because that's how it's going to be on the exam. So let's go ahead and build this out. So I'm gonna call this log reg. And so I'm gonna build out. I'm gonna say log underscore reg dot HTML. And as always, I'm going to bring in, okay, I don't like this now. It's kind of stressing me out. Move this over here, make this bigger so that way. Okay. Oof, I was getting claustrophobic. Okay. So let's bring in this guy right here. Okay. Control V. Perfect. Now, this is probably going to be, ChatGPT is probably going to just do it for me, but we don't want to rely on that. So I'm going to say dot container. Now I want these to be side by side. So I'm going to put them in a row so that way they are side by side. So I'm going to say dot row. And so what I want to do is I want to create a form. So I'm going to say form, or here it is right here. Go to register first name, last name, password, confirm password. That's perfect with register. And then we have login. Perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. So just kind of backtracking, what we're doing is we've got a form here and then we're just saying register. It's taking up half the space. And then we're saying it's going to go to register. So we're going to have to change our method here a little bit. So instead of kind of create, we're going to do that. I guess we can kind of change it here in a second. We could update that if we wanted. All we're grabbing is the first name, the last name, the email, and the password. And then we do have, I want you to notice, another one for confirm password. Cool. Now, secondly, we're going to have just another one for login, which is just email and password. Cool. So the way I want this to work is when my base route happens, I want to take them to here, but I don't want to go to this index.html anymore. I want to make sure that my people are logging in, so or registering. So I'm going to say log reg. Cool. And so if we just look at this real fast and I refresh, cool. So now I've got this login and register. This little thing is my NordPass, my little password manager. But I have first name, last name, email, password, confirm password, or email and password. Great. This looks perfect. Awesome. Again, I want to reiterate, you can come with a working login and registration to the exam. That's A-okay with me. It's okay with Coding Dojo. It's not like just me. The thing that you'll need to make sure is if you have, maybe it's not first name, last name, it's just name, right? And so you have to set up your model, you have to do all that. And then once you get the login and registration, you want to make sure you go ahead and alter these as much as you need to. Cool. So let's handle this. When we think about my code, it's me registering is basically me creating, right? I'm just creating a user here. So I'm actually going to update this, or I'm actually going to update this. This makes a little bit more sense to say register. And that's just because I don't want necessarily, we're not having like admin stuff. We can go and create a user. Just basically, if you want to create an account, create an account. And if you don't, you can't access our application. And so I'm going to call this register. It doesn't change anything other than, or it doesn't kind of ruin anything now that I've changed it. We just make sure that this works. And then in my actual index, we will get rid of user. Well, let's see. In user form, sorry, when we're creating. I guess we don't even need this file anymore. Okay, we'll figure that out. Cool. So this is gonna, when we, let me go back. When we click register, what we're doing is we're doing the exact same things as when we created, right? We're gonna say, hey, if the user is not valid, so we're first gonna check, is this information valid or not? But I don't want to redirect to my user form. I want to redirect back to my base route, because that is going to be my login and registration. So if it doesn't work, we need to redirect back there. We are then hashing our password. Just like Tenzin said, you could do this if you wanted to do this line right here instead and not create a variable. You could do that. Doesn't really matter. And then we are saving our data. And so what we'll do is we'll take this information and we will come here and we will save, right? So we're going to insert into. Now, one thing we also need to make sure that we do is take these values, my flashed all fields, all this information. I should go change this to this guy right here, just so we can still get our errors if I need. So I'm not going to use this user form anymore. For last name. Oops, sorry. I have email. And password. Now notice I've got an additional value here, right? Oh, that's awful. I guess it's fine. No, that's pretty gross. I'm just gonna keep it like this. I've got an additional value here for this confirm password. So what we can do is in my user, I've got this whole validator, right? We're validating the email, the password. What I can also do is just I can create a condition here. I don't need to, and I see students do this all the time where they think, okay, if my form has a create or a confirm password, I need to have that as a field for my model. And you don't. There's no need or no reason to resave a password if it's the same thing. It's just taking up space in your database. So we don't want to do that. But we can have that confirm password and just say if, and then we check data password does not equal data confirm password, saying that they are not the same thing. Then we can do a flash message of passwords do not match, confirm password. And then we say is valid as false. And so now what I can do is I can take this same idea. Yep. Put this above my confirm password. Oops, let's go. Sorry, I was in the wrong div. There we go. Cool. And then I'm just going to say confirm password. And now if my passwords are not the same, it's going to tell me, okay, hey, your password needs to be the same. So we're going to get, both of these. Cool. Great. Now I'm going to pause there because we did quite a bit. Are there any questions on what we just did? Basically, we just moved everything from our user form over to this log reg HTML. So nothing crazy, except we added in an additional field call in our validator that just checked, do these match? Again, we don't need to save this information. As long as they match, then we're good. We just need to save just the password. We don't need to save confirm password. You do not, and we'll repeat, you do not need a confirm password here. I see that all the time. Do not put that in your user class. We're just using that as a clear my code a little bit. We're just using that here, and then we're good to go. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
So all of the end fours that were under the user form, you were
Mhm.
just transferring it to the log reg.
Yeah. Just transferring it to login and reg.
Okay.
Now you might say, well, that doesn't make sense because how are we going to differentiate between, this one and that one? And there's once we get to login, we can kind of just change the names here and then, or have our own login validator. And so we could say like log email, log password. And then I can have in my user, here I have validate user. I could have something like we'll just do it now. We'll say static method. I'm gonna say def validate login. There we go. To where even before I again query my database, I'm saying, hey, if my email does not match email. Now this needs to change because this needs to say log email, right? If that doesn't match, then let's go ahead and say invalid email address. And if the password, I'm going to say log password, does not match, then we have log password. And so now whenever I log in, I can just have this validator as well. And so I can differentiate between the two. If I didn't do that and I just had them as password, then there might be some confusion.
If you didn't do the static method.
Yeah, so if I didn't do that and I left them the same, like in theory, I could say if, it might say, if the len data they're of first name, but there's not a first name for login, right? And there's not a last name. It's just email and password. And so it's a lot easier just to make our own static method and just say, hey, are these even legit or not? It's a lot easier.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And really what you could do is you could just say, you don't even need to check this. We'll get to login here in a bit. Because there's a more efficient way. This would work just fine. And I would, if you did this, I'd say, yep, passed. Great. There's a more efficient way we could do it. Okay. So we have this. I'm going to try. And then I'm going to put in. Oops. And then I'm going to do these as different. So when I try to register. Ooh. Refresh. Or did my server crash? No. Well, let's go check. So
think we
my
don't-
error, so that register, oops, so that register was not a valid post, right? URL. So let's go check that. So whenever I send this, I am sending it to /register. I go into my controllers. Do I have that? I don't. I have it as /users/create, right? And I run register. So here I could just say register. Cool. Now if I refresh, I say these are obviously different. I should expect that they're say passwords do not match. Perfect. Now, okay, so we've handled that. Now, what do we want to do? We want it to, I don't want to redirect back to I don't want to redirect back to login registration if somebody, accurately logged in. So let's go ahead and handle that. Let's kind of take that first thing that we have, this index.html, and let's create maybe something called a dashboard. So we'll say at app.route. And I'm going to say something like dashboard. Cool. And then I'm going to say dashboard render, and we'll say index.html. Because we already have an index.html, and then now we'll know, okay, we can do that. So once this is done and we've registered, I want to go to dashboard. So they register, and then it takes us straight in. Think about like Facebook. You sign up, it takes you straight to your main page. Same sort of idea. So let's go ahead and create my person. Let's refresh just in case. Okay. Okay. Cool. So we can see my user. If I go to users, I should see Becky Cal. That works great. We've registered, we've logged in. Now, one thing that I didn't do, which I'm kind of kicking myself, is one way that we can keep track, and we want to make sure, and this is another way that we can sort of protect our website, is I can utilize session and just say, hey, whoever was just created, I get that information back, right? And so what I can do is when I say user.save, this actually returns to me, the query returns to me the user I just created, and I have access to all of their attributes. So I could just say user equals user.save. And then what I can do is I can say session user ID equals user dot ID. Or let's see, I think I don't need, or sorry, it returns the ID back. Sorry about that. It returns the ID back. So I could say session user ID equals user, but I'm gonna say user underscore ID here. And so now I'll have access to that value. And just to prove that, I will print session user ID. Perfect. And so now let's go back here. I'm just going to say slash. Great. So it worked. And then we go to my git bash and we see that I got 9. So it created this user, Randy Cal, and 9. And you can also see that this is their password. So what's nice about this is now when we're creating a movie, I don't actually have to have this created by ID, right? Because I can assume that if my user is navigating to create movie and they're creating it, I know who it is, right? I have access to that value. And so what I can do is in my movie form, I can get rid of this finally. I don't want that anymore. But I could have a hidden. So input of hidden. And it's going to be called, what did I call it? I think user ID. And its value is going to be session of user ID. And we'll have to change that in a little bit because we can pass that into this form and then we're good to go. So this way I can basically just pass it in. You won't see it, but that information I'll know who created it, right? So it's going to be associated to this account. Cool. So that's a big thing that we want to do is we want to, when they register or log in, same thing. We're going to throw their ID in session so we know who is there, right? Who is available. So that's register. Are there any questions on that? And we'll knock out login. It's not super hard. You guys put it like a 1 to 5. How you feeling? Okay, 3.5, 3, 4. Okay. We'll keep going. And then if there's questions, obviously happy to help. So this is me registering my user. Now let's go ahead and my log reg, we've got this one. We're good to go. That's kind of taken care of. So I can even say this. It's a little trick too, is you gotta go to the parent and just click this arrow and it'll hide all that code. So you don't have to keep scrolling. Cool. So now let's work on this one right here. We've already got the form and it's going to this action login. So let's go and do that. And we could see this and the platform is really great when we're dealing with login here. Yeah, it's really awesome when we're dealing with that. So here, we can even just kind of follow this route here, is we're going to have this new method called login that needs to handle. So I need to say app route login, and we're going to def login. Now, I just put a whole bunch of code. Let's walk through it line by line. This method login is going to take in the data from my actual login. And it's going to take in the email. So you could put the password if you wanted. That's not necessary, but you can. But all we care about right now is this email. And that's because we are going to call user equals user.getByEmail data. Now, what this is doing is this is going into my get by email method, which I don't have, so we got to get that. So let's go get that. So I'm gonna say at class method, right? And say def get by email. It's a class method, so I do data. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run this query, select all from users where email equals whatever I passed in. So remember, we're gonna pass in email just like this from this data. So we're just querying our database where we have this condition. This is going to give us a list back, right? Our results is just a list of all the values that match that. We're gonna say if len results -1, return false. What do we think len results -1 means? What is that? What would that tell us if that's what we had? Knowing our query, what would len results -1 mean?
Would that mean the user doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Liam. That means that the user's not in our database, right? That we queried and used an email and we didn't get anything in return. So if that's the case, then we're going to return false. And we'll see why here in just a second. If we do get something, again, it's still list. It should just be one object, one value, right? And we say, okay, we want that value and let's just take the class instance of the first one, right? So that's result 0. That's what we've done before. So we're either returning false or the value itself. Now, the reason we return false is because we're saying user here, we say if not user, meaning if there's not a user that's returned to us, let's redirect back there. Because that means a user does not exist or could not find that. Cool. If not user means that if we get false back, then we're just going to redirect them. And we'll see, we can give some better tooling here in a bit. But from the base, we're just checking our database. Does the user exist from the email? If it does, or if it doesn't, let's redirect them back because there's nothing we can do. If it does, then we have this other statement here said, if not. And again, this is basically saying if this is not true, we're saying bcrypt.check password hash. That's a method within bcrypt. We are taking, because we're getting, this is either giving us an instance of my user or it's giving me false. If we got to here, that means we did not enter this statement because remember, once a method sees return, automatically goes back. And so we're saying, okay, great. We know we have a user. Now let's check their password hash of the user we just received with the password that we got from our form, from our login. Does the passwords match the one that they put in and the one we have in our database? Now, because bcrypt is doing this, it knows and can check and unhash and compare the two. We can't do that, right? And what this is saying, what line 33 is saying is, hey, if those don't match, another way you could say is if bcrypt, yeah, because you want to say this is going to return true or false, right? If those don't match, then we redirect. If they do match, well, great. We know we have the user and the password that gave me is good. So we can go ahead and let them in. Now, again, we want to keep track of who we are letting in because that way we know if they then go do a form or whatever, we can do that. But we put their session in we put their ID in session. And then we return, redirect back to our dashboard. So we can say, yeah, we can say, okay, great. We checked our database. They're in our database. We checked the password in our database compared to the password they provided. That's also good. Great. Welcome to our site. That's all login is right here. Now we could, before that, just like we have, is we could say, if not, user validate login, redirect. You could have that at the beginning as well. Before, let's even do that. Let's just check and make sure it works. It's good to go. You don't have to have really that, because if they provide a value that's not good, well, then they're not going to get anything. But what this will prevent is an extra query to our database, because queries cost money. Cool. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions? Any questions on login? Okay. Let's go see if it works. Let's go back here. Cool. Refresh. I know that it's b@c.com. I type in my password. Ooh, I got a bad request. Request.form email. Hey. So let's go into my code. I can already tell you what we did. We said request.form email, right? And request.form password. But we changed that, right? We changed it to log email and log password. And so it's saying, hey, I don't have an input value for email, because we called it log email. So here and here, and say log. Let's go back. Fresh. Cool. It worked. We can now do that. So we can log in and we can register a user. Got a couple more minutes. So there's some other things that you might already be thinking, like, oh, how else can I prevent like bad data from happening or multiple users having the same email? Well, we have a couple different things that we can do, right? Where I can say, like, here, before I even hit my database to save, or sorry, maybe not right there. But I could say this same thing, right? User equals user get by email, where I pass in maybe request.form a form of email. Say if user, then we return redirect. So basically we're going to check before, right? And say, hey, is this user already in my database? So I already have something with that password, right? And maybe I could add like a message that says, you know, hey, you already have an account with this. If you need to reset your password, do X, Y, or Z for that. This is just a quick way to check and say, hey, if the user's already in there, let's not let them, oops, I don't want. Yes. There we go. Sorry. Then let's not let them go. Else, all right, let's go ahead and save them. And you could put that at the very top too. That could be the first thing before you like hash a password and do all that. You can just actually put this up here. Cool. See, what else did I miss? Did I miss anything else? And notice we can also put flash messages in our controller. So for example, like here, I could say like flash email already in use, please log in. And then say something like email. I need to import flash. Cool. And so now what would happen is if they tried to register on email, it'll say, hey, email is already in use. Please log in. And then it redirects me back. So this is a way that we could also prevent that. Now, the last thing that we can do, I know that this was a whole bunch, guys, but so way to keep going. Is I can check and say, well, is, let's see, is it here? I want to make sure. Nope. Okay. What I can do is I can in my platform check before we even go to dashboard. And this is a way that I could kind of prevent that from happening. I could say if user ID not in session, meaning that if somebody just comes here and says /dashboard, it's going to check and say, is there a session ID? Is there a user ID in session? If it's not, well, then let's redirect. And then maybe we could, say Flash, please log in to view this page. Maybe I have like a login page, login or register to view this page, something like that. And it just prevents, and I could do this for all my pages. And so nobody can access anything unless they're logged in. So there's a way that I can kind of funnel that and basically start every route with like, hey, if this is not in session, let's kick them back out. They need to be able to be in session. And then just associated a pretty quick thing is I could have like a logout. It's just session clear. And then redirects. So if I had a button that said log out and just send me there, it logs me out. And so the next time, if I refresh, try to go somewhere, it's going to send me back to the main page. Okay, there's a lot, talked about a lot. Willing to go through anything you guys need. Are there any questions? I'm showing you all the code we talked about today. It was right here. All of this is on the platform, and obviously you'll have the recording, but are there any questions about what we talked about today? Cool. How are we feeling about this? Scale of 1 to 5? About a 2. Okay. It takes
Like a
practice.
3 to 4, yeah.
Yeah. About a 3, you said, Liam?
Between 3 and 4, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a perfect place. It's your first time seeing it. The platform goes through it really slowly as well. So the main things that we've sort of changed and upgraded is because you've done all of this, right? You know how to query a database via filter. Here, yeah, we're just using this method to check them, but that's kind of new, right? Where we're using bcrypt. So that makes sense. Here we're just putting in a couple different buffers. Hey, if it didn't match, if we already have the email, then we want to just redirect. If not, let's go ahead and create my user, set their session ID. So it's weird. It's a new muscle to flex. But again, you guys can come with this pre-built. All you'll have to make sure you do is make sure that this is updated. So if I don't give you a first name and a last name, I just say name and age, email, password, you just are able to kind of go in and say, okay, well, I need to change this to age. I need to change my query to age. I need to change this to kind of accommodate, and I need to change this to accommodate. But you have a lot of all the functionality, right? You're going to have an email and password. I can just guarantee you that. So all of this right here, you can just take that and use it. You're going to have to use bcrypt. So it's really just this kind of fluff information that you'll have to maybe alter and change.
It will.
Yeah.
About validated login, like you put password over there, but we already checked the password.
Yeah. So, for the validate login. Yeah, I think it pre-built and said like checking password. We wouldn't have to do that. So even this, right? We wouldn't even need to validate, honestly. I'm trying to think of we could validate if the email, I mean, we could run this because it prevents a query to the database. Just to say, hey, is the information before we even query the database to see if I have this email, is that information at all good? And we know that if it's gonna be 8 characters, our password has to be 8 characters. Then if they put in a password that's 6, we know that even with the hash, it's not gonna work, right? So you could keep it. Again, all this does is it prevents us from querying the database. Because we just say, hey, if that's not true, either it's not a good email, I don't even want to run this and query my database and check the email if it's bad. And if the password's less than 8 characters, then we can go ahead and, prevent it. Gregory, you asked, we'd have to change the names of the templates, models, and controllers too, right? What do you mean by that? You're going to have a user. I can guarantee you're going to have a user. And so you won't be able to have all of these because you don't know if we're going to deal with movies, if we're dealing with whatever, X, Y, or Z, but you will have a user that you'll need to be able to get all the users, get by email. You're going to have to do this. Something like this, maybe you don't know what that is. So you wait until the exam to do that. But like creating a user, you'll need to be able to register. So you'll need to be able to create. You'll need to be able to update a user. I can guarantee that. You'll need to be able to delete a user, and then you'll need to be able to validate. So all of this you should be able to do, but I might give you different conditions here, right? So I might say, make sure that the first name has a minimum of 3 characters. Make sure the password has, I won't do anything crazy like regex. You don't have to do regex. So it might just say less than 8 or less than 10 or something like that. It can't be less than 10. So you don't need to do regex for password.
Thank you.
Yeah. We also have all next week. All next week is really, and this is what my hope is, we're going to kind of walk through this again slowly, but it's just an exam, like a belt exam week. And so there might be a few different queries, different things that I want to make sure you guys know, but it's really next week is a week for you to ask questions. If there's anything that is not making a ton of sense, or you're just like, I don't even know what question I want to ask, but login is stressing me out, we'll go through it, right? It's easier if you email me prior, because then I can kind of like take the weekend, and then kind of by Sunday, if you really are struggling and you have something you want me to go over. I mean, obviously you can bring questions, but if you give the weekend, then I'll make sure that you kind of shoot me an email and I'll make sure that I talk about that and kind of we go through that. And then I'll open it up for questions after. So any questions here? And then also on Wednesday, prior to the algorithm, we will, I'll kind of give 20 minutes if there's questions, and that takes priority because it's coming up on the exam. Any other questions, friends? Okay. Well, I'll stop the recording here.